I'm live. We're live. Put some paper here just in case I need to write something down or write my name down or remind myself who the heck I am. Wait, I remember who I am. I already know the answer to that question. All right, well, it doesn't look like there's anybody here yet, which is totally fair because we're still 2 minutes out, but to avoid the technical difficulties of previous webinars, I decided I'd like to fire it up a little bit in advance, make sure everything is good. We're good. This time you get the amazing honor of joining me in my den. This is my workspace, which right now looks a little bit like it was attacked by some sort of monsters or possibly a hurricane. It's a pretty big mess. That's okay. I'm comfortable with that fact. There's something about genius and messes and desks and I don't know, whatever. Let's pretend that applies to me. I'm going to pretend that. Hopefully you will join me pretending as well. I saw a lot of people retweeting the fact that the webinar is going up. Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated. I really appreciate it when everybody kind of joins in and helps me get the word out. I was bad this week. I should have done more prep work and kind of let everybody know what was going on. But it's just, I've actually had quite a few projects going on this week that have kept me not so busy. So anyway, we got the word out. Buddy or lady. I guess lady could be a buddy, so that's all good. All right, let's see. Do we have, we've got some viewers. Welcome aboard. Hello. Oh, I got to do my stuff. First thing to do, crank up the cameraman. We're going to go, yes, like this. Good. And hopefully the Q&A is running. Okay. Would one of my 3 viewers send me a question? Please send me any old question, and let's just make sure this baby is working. Also, I appreciate any feedback on my network speed. I had an electrician friend of mine, my good friend Jeff Long, who runs J Long Inc. in the Pacific Northwest, run me new power cables and new networking cables into my den, specifically for the purposes of running these webinars and making sure that everything is extremely fast. He did it for a handshake and the promise of future reward of liquor on my part, no money out of pocket. So J Long Inc. Can't do better than those guys. I certainly haven't been able to. That's a plug. Boom. J Long Inc. I'm hoping this little piece of hair is sticking up. It's a little embarrassing. Oh well. I'm hoping somebody will send me a question. I see there's 3 people, but I don't see any questions. I still have our list of questions from before. We're making good progress on. Oh, we lost somebody. No. That's all right. Maybe they'll be back. They'll say, oh, they're back. Awesome. Okay. Let's put these back in order from where we were. Ooh, great question. I'm going to turn that question on. Thank you for asking. That's a terrific question. Hopefully you can all see it. We designed the weapons around the idea of players being able to carry only 2 weapons at a time. The origin for the 2, having buffering issues. And hi, Hardy, it is working. Awesome. Thank you, Vincent. Citri, I'm sorry that it's slow at your end. Hopefully it's not from here. If anybody else is seeing that issue, please let me know, and I'll kick some of my devices off the network. I'll do that even as we're speaking. Okay, so the question was about the weapons, and did we specifically design them with the thought that the player was only going to carry 2 at a time? The initial design for the Halo weapons did not include the idea that there were only going to be 2 at a time. The fact that there were 2 at a time, only 2 at a time, was an evolution of a design that we came up with on the game Oni, which, if anyone remembers, Thank you. Oni was a game Bungie was developing. We were doing it on PC, and at the time that was coming out of the Bungie West studio. And the reason that we stumbled across that particular design was we had spent an awful lot of time trying to categorize all of the weapons in the game into categories so that the interface could make some kind of sense. So if any of you will recall, shooters at that time, the control scheme for shooters was comparatively incredibly complex because it was all built around the function keys on the keyboard. Every shooter game basically used the function keys across the top of the keyboard, and you just, you whack the function keys to switch weapons. But on Oni, we were trying to make a game that integrated third-person hand-to-hand combat with weapons combat. And the control scheme that we'd come up with was this really cool, system that was kind of based around the WASD keys and the mouse. And it felt very intuitive, and it was very fluid, and it felt great. So then forcing the player to move their fingers up to the function keys and get them to switch weapons was really awkward, and it just broke the flow and the rhythm of the fighting. And I really wanted hand-to-hand combat and weapons combat to be closely integrated in that game. So we debated all these different control schemes of like, well, sometimes you could use this key to change your pistols or this key to change your rifles or blah, 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 all this other kind of stuff. And then somewhere along the line, I think we just got sick of it. And somebody was like, well, what if you can only carry 2 guns and you just basically, hit a button to switch between them? And at the time, the concept was so frightening and weird. We were all like, no, you couldn't do that. That's crazy. Just 2 guns. Unreal has 9 weapons and everybody's used to using the function keys. But we stubbed it in as a test, and it was spectacular. I mean, it was just really fluid, and it allowed you to keep your hands in this very intuitive position right on the keys, as I think anyone who's played League of Legends would know now. And it was terrific. I mean, it was great from a solution in terms of balancing the game. It allowed us to put more focus on making sure that each of the weapons was interesting and highly differentiated. And it was, it simplified that whole inventory question. It was fantastic. And so that's where the design actually came from the design on Oni. The Halo guys saw that, and when our team was joining Halo and we were kind of reworking things and moving into, putting what was originally a PC kind of massive multiplayer, not massive, but whatever, lots of multiplayer players together into a kind of, putting it onto console, they borrowed that control scheme from Oni, and that's the origin of the whole thing. So anyway, great question. Hopefully that is a good enough answer. No, it wasn't part of the original Halo design. They borrowed it from us on Oni, is the TLDR answer. Okay. Every Halo, except for Halo 1, has featured glowing armor when players pick up the overshield. Oops. Is this something you would put in CE if you could go back in time? Wow, that's an interesting question. Would I put it back in CE? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, my intention with the overshields, and again, this was 10 plus years ago, so I can't speak to, the really deep down crunchy sort of matrix design, but the intention with overshield was to give you a period of advantage, a kind of a time frame where you could be more aggressive than your shields would ordinarily allow you to be. But I don't know, the idea of kind of making them glow more just because they have the overshield on, I don't know. I can see how that's more fair from the standpoint of the players that you might bulldoze and kind of steamroller over, but I think it would make it less fun to have the shield because people would run away from you the whole time. So I don't think I would want that, because anything that makes the game inherently less fun, but this is just me off the cuff answering that question. So I would say, no, don't make the thing glow. Let the player who worked and fought for the overshield, basically be a bulldozer and mow over people and laugh, cackle in glee. That sounds more fun to me. All right. Great question. Thank you. What's next? Hardy. Last time someone asked about placing plasma rifle close to overshield. Okay, you think he was wondering if you meant players to use the plasma rifle to take out the over. Oh, no, no, sorry. Yes, I guess I did misunderstand if that was the question. Hopefully you can all see it. Vincent is pointing out that the player or the participant was probably asking, did I mean for the plasma rifle to be close to the overshield so that players could use it to take the overshield out? No, definitely not. The opposite, in fact. The intention with the overshield and with the invisibility was that, as if you've read my blog posts, you know that the intention behind the interaction of the shields and the alien weapons was that you'd have an advantage using the alien weapons, using the Covenant weapons specifically versus the human weapons. That was a way to give them additional depth and make them interesting and differentiated without taking away from the human weapons and without making them too much the same. So, yeah, no, it wasn't. The intention wasn't to sort of say, oh, well, here's the thing and the counter that's very close. I don't think, because again, that doesn't sound super fun. Fun is a strong guiding principle, in my humble opinion. So that doesn't sound super fun. It sounds more fun to me that a player would be able to scoop up the alien weapons and run around like the Predator for a while and be invisible and terrorizing people, overshielded or invisible, and then they lose their advantage and they have to kind of rejoin normal play patterns. That's more like what I would want it to be. But then I don't know. Someone asked me a really interesting question, and I've been getting this a lot. People sort of saying, are you aware of how the game is played today? And was this all in your intention the way it's played today? And the answer is it's not. It is what the player community has done is so much more complex and just unbelievable to me that it continues to boggle my mind, how much everyone seems to know about the game and how much they thought about it and how those kind of mechanics have resonated and evolved. The meta, if you will, has kind of evolved over time. So that would be one of those things that I'd really want to look at closely now if I had anything to do with it and sort of say, well, how do people feel about the overshield and how do they feel about its relation to the plasma weapons? Is it critical that it be there just in case somebody gets it? I'm not sure. Okay, let's move on. More questions coming up. Thank you for that, Vincent. Appreciate that. Interesting question. Great question. Wow, you guys are killing it with cool questions tonight. As developers, how do you deal with disagreements where one person feels X feature or weapon placement is better than one way and you feel another way? That is a great question. The fact of the matter, Jabberwock, is that that is a huge part of any creative process, those kinds of disagreements. And ultimately what ends up happening is that there are certain people on the team that you learn over time, you can start to recognize that their opinion is very valid and that they have the ability to help drive the gameplay numbers and to create that sort of a mental model, assess how it's working, and then help to advance it and push it forward. And so you don't weight everyone's feedback equally, I guess, is my answer to that question. Certain people, would probably come to me and say, I think this, or I think that, or, honestly, the testers would get really mad about certain features. Be like, what are you doing? This stinks. You can't overreact. And I'm not by any means dismissing testers' feedback. I'm just saying you get a lot of people up in your face all day long about, choices, decisions. And so you have to keep in touch with your model, that mental model that I've talked about, and have confidence in your own sensibilities that it's correct, but use as a checkpoint those people whose opinion you really value. In the case of Halo CE, one of the people whose opinion I would value all day is Jason Jones. Jason is a legitimate genius and an absolutely, sort of gifted designer when it comes to understanding and manipulating data structures. So, if Jason walked up to me and said, Hardy, I think blah, if I think this gun is too strong, or this map is too weak, or whatever, and he by no means is alone. There's a lot of people on the Bungie team and a lot of people on every team I've ever worked with who kind of get that little bit higher perspective, only because I've watched them in action and I've listened to their advice. I've tried to act on that advice and see if it yielded good results. So anyway, great question. That is a terrific question. It's a big part of the creative process. Hopefully that answer is helpful. Let's see. Am I familiar with any of the changes Gearbox made to the PC version? All right, Dylan, I'm going to put your question up there only because you said they fixed Sidewinder. That's yes, Gearbox, thank you. Honestly, I'm not. The honest truth of the Gearbox development was that it was fraught with perils. From the Bungie perspective, anecdotally, because it was entirely handled, out of house. Anecdotally, all the people who were trying to deal with Gearbox and get the port of Halo PC done were incredibly frustrated by how long and how difficult that process ended up being. It took forever, it seemed like, to actually get it done and up and working in a state. I have no idea why. I wasn't directly related to it. I wasn't participating in that process at all. So I tried to stay out of the way. From my perspective, I kind of saw a complicated situation. There were a lot of big brains that were engaged with trying to make that happen, and I just tried to stay out of the way. I'm glad they fixed Sidewinder. I'd be fascinated to actually watch people. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask you all, does it play better now that they fixed the teleporters? Let me know. It's one of those questions that's haunted me for years. But anyway, that's all I really know. I'm not familiar with what Gearbox did. I just know getting that version done was a super pain, and Bungie super frustrated by those guys in the process. All right, let's see. Here we go. In Damnation, was grenade jumping over the... No. Vincent, good question. Awesome question. Hilarious question. Here's a factoid for all of you budding designers to know. In the first day of a major AAA release, your game will be played more times than the totality of testing throughout an average dev cycle. So in other words, on day one of a AAA release, more people will play it than the entire test organization was able to play it for, say, 3 years, doing that as a job all day, every day for 3 whole years. And that's just in the sheer number of hours. I mean, you get, ideally millions, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of players, who spend 1 day playing it. The man hours just dwarf the amount of time that you had in testing. And that is sort of the terrifying reality of a AAA launch. And one of the reasons why I personally put so much emphasis on building a model that you believe in and balancing in that direction. Because if you're not super confident about the numbers that you put in and the reason why you've made certain choices, it will get washed away. Absolutely. So that's the long way of coming back to your question about Damnation. I have a related anecdote, which I will share with you. No, I wasn't. Grenade jumping really wasn't a thing when we were testing CE. Believe it or not, it really wasn't something that anybody had figured out how to do. By the same token, all the crazy stuff that people do with the vehicles in Blood Gulch, and honestly every multiplayer map, I spent a long time, comparatively, driving around the Warthog in all of those levels, and I was convinced that there was no way that there were ever going to be able to get the vehicle into crazy positions on the multiplayer maps. And everybody kept saying, did you really test those walls? Are you sure? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I drove all over the place. It was great. I mean, everything's really, really stable. Yeah, I was wrong. That's just the reality. So no, we were not aware that you would be able to do the cool grenade jumping trick that you guys have worked out. But that goes back to that depth thing and the evolution of the gameplay that it's reached right now. So, and that's the kind of thing that I would be, again, like, it's so interesting. I would want to look at all that and understand it clearly if I was trying to drive, gameplay balance for the Halo series now, just because it's kind of amazing what does exist as far as techniques. Okay, hopefully I'm not, I don't know, making you guys sad about the fact that I was like, yes, no, I planned that. Thank you for finding it. I suppose maybe I should lie about the next one. I will. I'm going to lie about the next one and pretend that it was all part of my plan. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud. All right. Thank you for that awesome question. C-Tree is still having a bunch of buffering issues. I hope that's not still true. Is anyone else having buffering issues? Please let me know. I'm not 100% sure. I can, hang on. Let me call in the big guns here. Ooh, I just got a cool question on Twitter. No, actually, you know what? Let me see if other people have that problem, and then I'll react. Okay, Mark has a question. Which Halo 1, great question. Okay, cool. Which Halo 1 multiplayer map had the most hours put into it before being finished? What was the hardest to make it go? Derelict was very difficult for me to model because I was such a total noob when it came to my modeling skills in 3D Studio Max. And there are some deep flaws in just the basic flow pattern of that level that I would, be keen to address. But to address them correctly would require it to be a different level, completely. So, that one took me the longest to do because it was just taking on something that was, good. I got a streaming is fine comment from someone. That's good. C3, I hope you can work it out, buddy. If not, let me know. Anyone else having problems, let me know, and I'll see if I can kick my kids off the network or something. Which one had the least? Honestly, it had to be Rat Race. I mean, Rat Race. Actually, no. You know what? Actually, Wizard. I'm going to change that. Rat Race, I don't know. I was kind of messing around with some ideas and trying to make Rat Race work and kind of make an interesting flow pattern. Wizard popped into my head during a meeting. Actually, it was kind of a team, I think it was Seropian or somebody was addressing the entire team. And I was sitting on the floor in the conference room, and all of a sudden this idea of a map where you could go up, but only in one direction. I don't know where the idea came from. And I drew these really weird kind of scribbles in my notebook, and it just, boom, it just happened. I mean, it happened so fast. It didn't even really need a lot of extra love to kind of make it work the way that I was hoping to. That said, if you guys hate the map, maybe you needed more love. But as far as the core concept, it came together really fast. So, okay. Great question. Thank you. Let's see. What's next? How long were some of the popular maps in development? Ooh, this is an interesting question. How long should a map stay? All right. How long were they in development, and how long should they stay in development? Well, I don't know the answer for that question with later Halos. I'm not sure. In our case, as I was working on CE, I really wanted to try to march against a certain number of large maps to support the maximum number of players, more medium maps, and just a few small, very few player maps, because I really wanted to kind of hit that sweet spot of, medium size, medium maps, and editing the big ones and supporting them was more difficult. And they were all so different that I honestly don't think I could answer the question as to what the average time was. Some came together more quickly than others. Some, like I was saying with Derelict, I ended up spending a whole lot of time just because I was such a noob trying to model that. I'm sure that a really good 3D modeler would have been able to, bang it out a lot faster than I was. Than I could have. But in any case, I hate to cop out. then there's the question: how do you figure out when it's time to draw the line and finalize it? Part two of that question is a really good one. I would make the case that, you know, someone asked me at one point, you know, how do you know if the game is fun or if the game is not too long or something like that? This was kind of in passing conversation this week. I spoke to one of the guys, one of the pro team over at 343, who invited me out to lunch. It was awesome. We had a great time chatting. And for me, there's kind of a visceral benchmark. At the end of a match, if you feel the impulse to put the controller down, something is wrong. You know, the map is too, the game or the game type is too hard, or the map is, you know, too difficult to find your way through. If you hit a barrier at that point where you consciously or even unconsciously decide to step away, then, you know, at least in my case, I would know that something is wrong. And so for me, and this is going to sound very touchy-feely, hocus pocus, but I would honestly watch players' reactions when we finished multiplayer games on CE. I would very carefully watch out of the corner of my eye to see if anyone had that impulse to put the controllers down and be like, okay, I'm done. That's it. I'm out. Or if they were like, yeah, let's do it again. Let's go. Let's get it again. And that was a way for me to know, especially when we were testing the maps. And of course, there's a lot of variables that enter into it. You know, did you pick a game type that was too hard or unbalanced, or, you know, were the teams unbalanced or whatever? But there is a moment, in my humble opinion, when you know that the map is really working. And maybe it's, you know, maybe it could be quantified more carefully. I have to think about that, but that's a good question. I've always known when a map is done. My good friend Scott Rogers, who is an absolute genius level designer, always talked about the fact that a design is finished when you take away everything that isn't fun. That's a pretty good maxim. So anyway, don't know I 100% believe that, but I'll quote him anyway because he's awesome. All right, let's move on. Let's see. Video stream is fine. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Vincent, answer your question. Yes. Reticle magnetism and bullet magnetism was absolutely in our purview as we were working on the multiplayer stuff. The core controls, the actual behavior of the camera relative to the sticks was really solid. I mean, it was very, very solid. So I didn't have to worry too much about, you know, actually really at all messing around with the core behavior of the character. Run speed, jump height, and look speeds, you know, and how they were responsive to the analog sticks. I would not have wanted to touch that. That was a labor of an intense amount of work from the core team, the core Halo team, to make it so that the actual controls felt good and the movement of the character was correct. The magnetism on bullets is absolutely something that I was playing with, you know, like what the reticle snap was, and, you know, how much magnetism was on certain bullets. I think in one of my posts, my blog posts, I mentioned that I had the tracking shot on the plasma pistol turned up so high that it would whip around corners, and everybody called me a dirty cheater and kicked me out. Said, you can't do that. That's not fair. And they made me turn it down. So yeah, that is definitely something that I played with quite a bit. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, fun question. I named all the maps. Not all the maps. That's not true. The only one I didn't name was Chill Out. And Prisoner. I take that back. Chill Out and Prisoner. Prisoner was named by Chris Carney, and Chill Out was named as a reaction to Stephen Okazaki. Stephen Okazaki was the one who first started to develop the geometry for that map, but Stephen and I had a hard time working together very well, and so he went back to kind of single player duties, and other people were pushing that forward. And Stephen is a very fiery tempered guy, and so I think that the name, I don't 100% know where the name Chill Out came from, but I think it was kind of a reaction to Steven's core nature. Just be like, dude, chill out. Steven, I hope you're doing fine, buddy. Hope you're out there. Hope we never actually have to work with each other again. I'm sure neither of us would choose to. So there you go. All right. Let's see. All right. Lots of, yes, everyone is saying everything is streaming fine. Okay. Well, then let me take a moment to put in a shameless plug. So last time we were doing the webinar, I mentioned that I was going to be teaching this class on, put a webinar up on the fundamentals of level design. And as I was doing it, I realized that I really value how much time and energy people have put into joining me to have these conversations and talk about stuff. So I wanted to give a discount for everybody who's already on my mailing list, and make sure that I could, kind of figure out how to do that. So I turned off the ability to buy the webinar, but it's back on now. And as such, it's slipped a little bit. So please, if you're interested, join my mailing list, because you'll get a little thank you email that has a code in it that it is, some money off of the webinar, the level design thing I'm going to teach. I'm going to kick it off next Wednesday. If you're interested in level design, if you're interested in my process, if you want to know kind of more about some of the real fundamental thinking about how to approach level design, I think it would be great. I had the honor of working with some guys from USC. They were graduates of the USC game development program. And what surprised me was that although they had experience with the tools, they really didn't have kind of a fundamental grounding in a process. Like, hey, this is how you should approach it. Then let's build a process together. And so I really like the opportunity to kind of explain it to people. So if you're interested in all, sign up for my mailing list, pass the word, get the discount, and sign up. I'd love it. It'd be awesome. All right, let's see. We might have time for one more question here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Well, there's some great questions here. CG, I see your question. Here, let's look at Billy's. How do I personally and others I've worked with like to approach level design? Billy, it's an intensely personal process. One thing that I have noticed is that the best level designers make people are kind of come from people. No, sorry, that's not accurate. Let me put it this way. Some people have an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional space. They understand it in a very intuitive and clear way. And so there are certain things that just make sense to them. Then there are other people who don't necessarily have that same knack for 3D space. And the people who do have the knack for it, they tend to work in 3D first. They tend to kind of go right to 3D and start building stuff in SketchUp or building inside of Max or inside of Maya, or they just go right to the tools and start kind of sketching in 3D. I think that the people who don't necessarily have that same intuitive grasp like to kind of work in 2D. My background, before Bungie, actually, I did a lot of 2D design work only because of the projects that I was working on. And I have found that it helps me to work through and think things through a little bit more thoroughly. So I prefer to make some sketches and just try to let my thinking gel before I jump to 3D. All right, let's see. We have time for one more. Well, we're over time, but we're getting awesome questions. Okay. Here's a question from Citri, who was having technical problems, so we're gonna answer his. If I worked on Halo's multiplayer after the first one, what would I would have kept the same? What would I change? Oh my gosh. That is, it's out of scope. That's a great question. Let's see if we can't talk about that some other time. That's a huge question. And it has to do with that guiding philosophy and that mental model, but that's a tough one. There's a lot to talk about there, but I think it's out of scope for where we are right now. All right, last one. Do I think, this is a fun question, Jabberwock's jumping in. Do I think game development is harder than it used to be? Well, yes and no. The technical, let's see, the technical knowledge necessary to be successful at a high level is way higher than it ever was. I mean, you have to know so much about rendering technology and animation technology, and you have to know, such incredible complexities, such complex topics that it's kind of dizzying. I mean, you've seen the rise of pure technical artists and pure technical designer that is kind of that interface between the programmer and the designer, or the programmer and the artist. Those were, I mean, that didn't exist when I was first coming up through the industry. That said, it's also a lot simpler than it was in my day, if I may. In my day, there were no indie games. There really, indie games were not a thing. I mean, I guess you could sort of say that there were, but indie games like the very first Ultima, which I bought in a Ziploc plastic bag for my Apple IIc Plus, which I got as a Christmas present from my parents, were just the games you bought at the Mac store. I mean, that, you saw Ultima there were maybe 2 copies sticking on a little rack thingy in the Apple store, and we bought one of them and loaded it up off of cassette. It was awesome. It was like, yeah, stick the cassette in and make it go. But it wasn't a concept of indie development, which is so common and prevalent now. I mean, it's amazing what you can get your hands on as far as software and technology for people to really be able to express themselves with games. So it's harder if you're trying to work at the very high end. If you want to be a AAA developer, what you need to know for art and what you need to know for technology and even design is so high. But if you just want to make a game and express yourself in the medium, interactive medium, I'd say it's actually easier now. All right, everybody, thank you so much. I hope you'll check out the webinar thing if you're interested, and I will see you next time.